Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Nasser El-Tibi, Senior Anchor, Al Arabiya.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, good morning. I guess that's me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our hydrogen panel. After decades of repeated attempts, hydrogen as an energy source, or rather an energy carrier, never really reached that liftoff point that some have predicted in the past. Despite that, hydrogen remains an essential gas feedstock. It's used in crude oil processing, it's used in making methanol for plastics, it's used in producing ammonia for fertilizers. That's the main ingredient there. But with climate change topping the world's agenda, the long-awaited energy moment for hydrogen might be dawning upon us. Lest we forget, the gas burns cleanly, producing water and no CO2 emissions. But hydrogen's energy moment will only materialize if the world produces hydrogen in a climate-neutral way. That means either by capturing the associated carbon emissions if we're producing it from fossil fuels, or by generating it from renewable energy sources. And for this energy moment to happen at speed and with a competitive cost structure, the industry and the technology need to build up and scale up massively. But what are the obstacles that could hinder the viability of clean hydrogen at scale? What sectors of the hydrogen supply chain need the most investment, and what incentives are necessary to ensure widespread commercialization? Is hydrogen, ladies and gentlemen, the fuel of the future and always will be, as the saying goes? Or has that future finally arrived? I'm very happy to host the esteemed panel here with me to discuss this further. Mr. Ahmad Khowaiter is the Chief Technology Officer at Saudi Aramco, and Dr. Samir Sarhan is the Chief Operating Officer of Air Products, and Mr. Sherif Foda, the Chairman and CEO of the National Energy Services Reunited NESR. Very difficult name, probably NESR is a much shorter abbreviation. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Ahmad. Back in 2018, at the FII, on stage, the Saudi energy minister at the time told me that Saudi Arabia is planning to become a global player in LNG. Okay? Now it seems that Aramco's leapfrogging LNG and delving straight into hydrogen. What is the strategic reason behind this? What does Aramco see in hydrogen's outlook that it doesn't see in LNG's?
So as you know, today the world has really moved a long way since 2018. The global ambitions to achieve lower carbon footprint energy have, I believe, multiplied and gone to a much higher level. We have seen commitments by many countries to try to decarbonize their economies and decarbonize their energy systems and lower the carbon footprint. And if we are trying to go to zero globally, then there is no way around hydrogen. Hydrogen is your only option in many of the hard to decarbonize sectors to basically drop in to allow that decarbonization. So the environment has changed. The demand and the supply, especially the demand outlook, has changed since 2018. We see IEA has now projected upwards of 38 million barrels of oil equivalent hydrogen demand in 2050, which makes hydrogen a major component of the energy system, the primary energy system. So I believe that that's the main driver that has made hydrogen really seem to be the best option going forward. It's that ambition, I would say, of global ambition to achieve net zero. And I would say also the technology maturity of renewables, of and the technology maturity of use of hydrogen in the form of fuel cells, all have come together to create an opportunity that it really is one of the best opportunities to create low carbon energy.
And we're going to talk about carbon capture, because that's also a very crucial technology for clean hydrogen in the future. Dr. Serhan, hydrogen seems like the new buzzword. It's being talked up as the fuel of the future. Air Products is betting heavily on that outlook. But hydrogen has been here before, full of promise, never really takes off. What's different this time around for hydrogen, and where do you see its future applications?
When it comes to hydrogen, I mean, Air Products, really, we have a history of 40 years in this. We were the first to supply NASA hydrogen for fuel for the Space Shuttle program. We are the biggest hydrogen producer in the world with around 9,000 tons per day. So it's part of our DNA. And we are using all of this capability now to transition to low carbon hydrogen. We see significant demand there. We see it as a low carbon for fuel for heavy vehicles like trucks, buses, trains, airplanes. We see applications in refining. We see applications chemical, petrochemical, steel industry. It's real. We really see the energy, the momentum developing all over the world.
Of course, and you're also in the green energy, green plant in NEOM, which we're going to be talking about later. Yeah. Mr. Sherif, you're an oil field service guy, and NESR is an oil field service company. Where do you fit in that value chain for hydrogen?
So thank you, Nasser. First of all, I'm very honored to be here in the FII, and it's always a pleasure to be here. And as you've seen this week, has been really a great announcement and show really the leadership of Saudi Arabia. And at the same time, in January, we actually launched our ESG impact segment. And the purpose of that is to provide technologies to enable the energy sector to produce oil and gas in a friendlier manner, or energy in a friendlier manner. So what does that do with hydrogen now? Is actually the biggest role of the OFS is definitely on the carbon capture and storage. Because if you have seen today, majority of the hydrogen produced today, more than 95% is actually gray hydrogen. It does not have any impact on climate change. It has to be either blue or green. And definitely the role here is on emission, and actually methane and monitoring how to capture the carbon during even the energy and during the hydrogen production. In the same time, I think we can play a big role actually on the green hydrogen, especially on capturing that waste of energy that happens in a lot of our operation and infrastructure from flaring, for example. A lot of countries actually in the region, to be able to produce the oil, they flare gas, and this is waste. Beside the fact that it's obviously the carbon footprint of our operation as well, how to lower that carbon footprint, to be able to do that, which is actually enable all the carbon capture, because at the end of the day, we have to be pragmatic to know how we use our current infrastructure of the region to be able to produce any other sort of energy.
And we're going to be talking more about that. But Mr. Ahmad Khowaiter, moving on from Sherif's point there on carbon capture, you guys have some experience with this technology, capturing the CO2 at the Hawiyah gas plant, piping it to Uthmaniyah for enhanced oil recovery there. Is Aramco ready to scale up things with carbon capture? Is the technology ready to be scaled up? And more importantly, at what price tag?
So yes, definitely we are ready. I believe that the technology has proven itself over many years. The question of technology feasibility is not there. The technology is at scale today. 37 million to 40 million tons of CO2 are injected today globally into geological formations, and safely. And so that technology is mature and ready to go. We have been operating our own pilot, 800,000 tons a year capacity for the last 6 years. No problems, no challenges. So I really do believe the technology is mature. The cost structures are very compatible with I think the competitive energy costs that are needed for hydrogen. So it really does allow, for example, low carbon hydrogen to be produced today at scale with very competitive costs.
What are we talking about? $2
I would
per
say
kilogram, or?
At the location of production, we're talking about in the range of $1.5 a kilogram for low-carbon hydrogen. At the point of production, the challenge with hydrogen is transport. So the big challenge is converting it to something that can be transported or compressing it and transported. There's some cost associated with that. But at point of production, we're talking in the $1.5 to $2 a kilogram range, which is far below alternatives for now. As the alternatives have to scale up, it will take some time before they get competitive.
Dr. Serhan, Air Products is leveraging its industrial gases expertise. You've talked about 40 years of hydrogen production, but you want to become a vertically integrated clean hydrogen player. What sectors of the hydrogen supply chain do you see that needs the most investment?
I think, as Ahmed mentioned, it's really creating that infrastructure to distribute the product. I mean, this is really where we also need policymakers to help in that, to have that infrastructure. The vehicles to basically be able to run, like having trucks that can run on a hydrogen fuel cell. So these are the limitations we see right now that mean to really go mass scale.
Sherif, hydrogen sulfide, just to let people know here, it's a colorless gas known for its pungent rotten egg smell. Some of you have probably encountered it at visits to fields or refineries. It's extremely flammable, highly toxic, but could that hydrogen sulfide be introduced into the hydrogen value chain?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously today it's an experiment. There is a couple of initiatives, one from the Ohio University and that has some small pilot scale that was successful. It's called the Sulfide process. It's the chemical compounding process. But if this is successful, that's actually will be a real breakthrough, because you're going to get hydrogen and sulfur, and you don't have any CO2, right? So, but obviously it requires to be able to scale it. And I think all these technology, you're talking still 5 to 7 years at least to try to make it on a scale, and then after that you need to get it economical. But definitely, again, in our region, this is something very significant for us, because we produce a lot of H2S. You know, in a lot of fields today in the region, actually it cannot be produced because of very high H2S, 28%, 30%. You cannot produce these fields, or you have to find a way. Imagine you can, in the same place, you can get this and convert it to hydrogen and sulfur.
And sulfur,
so you produce
both valuable products.
Exactly.
Is blue hydrogen a stepping stone in the medium term towards green hydrogen in the long term?
So I don't like the term blue or green personally. I'm a low-carbon hydrogen fan. I believe that we should use the term low-carbon because it's not going to be either blue or green alone. The most optimal production will probably be a combination of the two for a lot of reasons. So I believe that blue hydrogen, as you call it, and which is fossil-sourced or natural gas-based hydrogen production, low-carbon hydrogen production, is ready today to scale. So we're already talking about the Jafurah gas hydrogen project of 11 million tons of ammonia by 2030 in that time frame. If that scale was to be transferred to alternative approaches, so that's 11 million tons would require 50 gigawatts of renewable capacity to do with electrolyzers, and it would require 50 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. So today we only have a few gigawatts per year of electrolyzer capacity. So the scale problem is truly a challenge. If we are trying to meet world-scale energy requirements, we need basically natural gas-based hydrogen to meet the demand, to enable this transition to work to low carbon. So I feel that the scale issue is not well understood. You know, the typical, for example, you know, a NEOM project of around 5 gigawatts. It's a big renewable project, a very big, a global renewable project. But compared to an oil well, you know, that's equivalent to about 12 to 15,000 barrels a day of oil. You know, so that's a small, you know, kind of oil and gas energy capacity. So you need a lot of those to really meet the 35 or 38 million we're talking about 2050. And I think the fastest way to do that is to move to leverage our existing energy infrastructure and decarbonize it with carbon capture.
So So probably there are some synergies between blue and green also in the future as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As you try to go very low carbon capture with any fossil source, you have the methane, you have the other issues. So there's a higher cost to get to the last 5%, I would say, of CO2 associated with production of hydrogen from natural gas or oil. That last 5% is better done perhaps with a green hydrogen. So you can bring the mix carbon footprint down very economically. So I think you always need a synergy between these two. And there's many other technical synergies as well.
Dr. Serhan, so yes, the NEOM project is probably the production of 15,000 barrels a day only, but in the green hydrogen sphere, this is the biggest green hydrogen project currently in the world. Tell us a little bit more details for the people here. Give us a little bit more details about the project, the capacity, and an update on where the project stands today.
Okay. You really see and hear a lot about MOUs, LOIs, about low carbon hydrogen. I mean, I think you can really see Air Product is walking the talk. Because of that leadership in the gray hydrogen, I mean, we have really announced major projects. They're not MOUs, they're projects in full execution. You mentioned the NEOM project, which is going to be making history, world leader basically in the production of green hydrogen. And we have announced after that the two biggest blue hydrogen projects, the ones in Canada and the one also in Louisiana. These are also world leading, making history also when it comes to blue hydrogen. Coming back to NEOM, I mean, we're really proud and honored, I mean, to team up with NEOM and Aqua Power in Saudi Arabia to produce significant amount of green hydrogen to be used for fuel, for heavy-duty vehicles.
So how many tons are we talking about?
650 metric tons per day. I mean, as I mentioned to you, I mean, our capacity today is around 9,000. So this is 650. The one we announced for a blue hydrogen in Louisiana is 1,850. The one we announced in Canada is 450. So that's basically now adding around like 2,000 metric ton of low carbon hydrogen, adding that to the world. That's pretty significant. Of course, like Ahmed mentioned, it's still a drop in the ocean in regard to the total energy, but it's really a major announcement project under execution. We have a full project team working on the NEOM project. We're doing site preparation. We're buying long lead items, and will be coming on stream at a very low competitive costs.
In what year?
2026.
2026, we'll be on the lookout. Yeah. Sherif, during oil extraction in the Gulf, so much water is pumped, but it's seawater. Do you think this water, and you mentioned earlier the flared associated gas, could they both be married to produce green hydrogen on site?
Yeah, this is, again, how can you use the current infrastructure to do something different, right? Today, you know, the green hydrogen, the water cannot be, most of the theory is called distilled water, which is, obviously our region does not have water, so we're not gonna make water from our plant to make green hydrogen. It doesn't make sense, right? So the key is, how can you do something about, again, the sector, about the water that we produce? You know, during the production of oil, look at, for example, a country like Oman, where in the south you have huge 90% water cut from the well. So you're talking about 7-8 times the amount of water produced to be able to produce 1 barrel of oil. Can we do something about that water if the salinity works with some technology and use some of the gas to do, which is, Dr. Ahmed said, can you do something hybrid between the blue and the green? It's not really renewable, but you can use the infrastructure of the gas that is, today you almost flare, and use the water that you produce from the oil field. Then the oil sector, the energy sector becomes greener because actually it's producing water instead of using water. Right?
Interesting point. Okay, so I guess we have a minute left, and I want to ask you, Mr. Khowaiter, how can policymakers best support the nascent low-carbon hydrogen industry? Should it be an infrastructure-led approach by supporting investors, or should it incentivize demand, or should governments themselves create the actual demand centers, at least initially?
So I think the hydrogen option is really the best option for hard to decarbonize sectors, and governments have to recognize that. But it is a costlier option. it is going to cost more. And in the same way that we incentivize renewables because we recognize the long-term value of renewables, there has to be a demand-side incentive to pay the higher cost of energy. If you look at the use of low-carbon hydrogen in power or in transport, there is a need for support initially. But over time, as the costs come down, we do believe that it will become competitive. So I think the regulation and the standards around what is low-carbon hydrogen is very critical. I think that needs to be accepted and understood so people can design to those standards. I think the need for some incentives on the demand side to be able to allow the difference of energy cost to be covered. And I do believe that there is an infrastructure need. There's a huge infrastructure investment that needs to be made. And that infrastructure needs to be supported, whether carbon capture, whether renewable power projects. There needs to be capital support in those areas or tax relief in some countries, depending on the jurisdiction. So there really, I think governments have all taken this a different approach, but it all comes down to basically those three means of support that are necessary to kick off and get the scale up and the cost down.
All right, so we're out of time, but the last question is a question that I ended my intro with, the saying in the industry that, clean hydrogen, it's the fuel of the future and always will be. With a vote of a yes or no, will it always will be?
Definitely yes.
Is that probably, you mean it will probably always will be the future fuel?
Definitely yes.
Definitely yes? Okay, what do you say? No or yes?
I mean, I believe it's the future of today. Okay.
So it won't always will be. It will be. The future has arrived.
Needs to be scaled up.
I guess
I think that was. I think we both agree on that.
But
I
Nasser,
think so.
just a comment about the policymakers. I think
Sure.
it's also
Go
very
ahead.
important because everybody talk about the 2050. I think really policymakers need to act now to really to develop that sense of urgency to try to really incentivize demand and improve demand.
Well, we've got the COP26 coming up in Glasgow, and the fourth day there is all about energy. We're looking out for some decisions and announcements on that front. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. Thank you, audience, for your kind attention.
Thank you.
Just a final note, Ms. Idi Lush will be joining you for the next panel to moderate the network effects on digital finance. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Good job.